Before you moved in, someone was already watching your house. Not a person, not a camera. Something that has been perched in the same oak tree at the edge of your property since before you signed the papers, since before the previous owners, since before anyone who currently lives on your street was born. It watched the family that lived there before you pack their boxes and leave. It watched the moving truck pull away. It watched the house sit empty for weeks. And then it watched you arrive. It assessed you the way it has assessed every human who has ever stood in that yard, quietly, patiently, from a distance you never thought to look at. And it made a decision about you, not about your house, not about your yard, about you. What is watching your house right now is older than your neighborhood, older than the roads that run through it, and it will be watching long after you are gone. Welcome to Bird's Eye Psychology. Subscribe before you go anywhere, because what you are about to learn has been happening outside your window your entire life. And once you understand it, you will never look at your yard the same way again. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you 4 things. Which birds have been watching your property longer than you have lived there? How they track and remember every human who passes through. What they know about you specifically that you have never told anyone. And what happens to that knowledge after you leave. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover is the part most people find hardest to sit with. And it is the truest thing in this entire video. Let us start with who was there before you. The American crow lives between 7 and 14 years in the wild. In protected urban environments, some individuals have been documented living past 20 years. 20 years. Think about what that means for your neighborhood. The crow sitting on the power line outside your house right now may have been born before you moved in. It may have watched every family that has lived in your house for the past 2 decades. It may have a memory of your yard that stretches back further than your lease or your mortgage. But crows are not the only long-term residents. Northern cardinals live up to 15 years in the wild. The male cardinal who comes to your feeder every morning may have been coming to that same yard since before you put the feeder up, since before you moved the feeder to its current location, since before you were part of the equation at all. Black-capped chickadees live up to 12 years, mourning doves up to 30 years in captivity, American robins up to 14. The birds in your yard are not transient visitors passing through. They are long-term residents, and you are the one who moved into their territory. But here is where it gets deeply unsettling. Because these birds do not just remember your yard, they remember every person who has ever stood in it. Dr. John Marsluff's research at the University of Washington demonstrated something that permanently changed how scientists think about bird memory. Crows can recognize individual human faces with an accuracy that rivals human facial recognition technology. They store those faces in long-term memory. They cross-reference new faces against stored ones, and they update their files every single time a familiar face reappears. But it goes further than individual memory. In Marsluff's experiments, crows that had negative experiences with a specific masked researcher passed that facial recognition data to other crows who had never had any direct experience with that person. Through alarm calls, through behavioral cues, through what researchers now describe as social transmission of acquired information, a warning about a specific human face spread through a crow community like a story passed around a table. Which means the crow outside your window right now may know things about the people who lived in your house before you that you will never know. It watched them, it filed them, it evaluated them against the same criteria it is currently using to evaluate you. Are they predictable? Are they calm? Do they move through the yard with consistency and routine? Or are they erratic, loud, a source of unpredictable threat? Every person who has ever stood in your yard has a rating in that system, and now, so do you. Now here is the question that changes everything. What specifically do they know about you? Since the day you moved in, the birds in your yard have been building a profile, not of your house, of you. They know what time you leave for work. Research on urban bird behavior consistently shows that birds in residential areas learn and adapt to the specific daily routines of the humans in their territory. They know your schedule not because they are told it, but because they have observed it enough times to model it. They know which door you use most often. They know the sound of your car specifically. They know the difference between when you walk into the yard with intention and when you wander out without one. They know whether you look at them or through them. That last one matters more than you might expect. Studies on bird habituation to humans show that birds distinguish between directed human attention and incidental human presence. A person who consistently looks at birds directly is filed differently from a person who moves through the yard without noticing them. One is potentially interactive, a source of food or information. The other is essentially furniture. Which category you fall into in your yard's bird community depends entirely on how you have behaved since the day you arrived. And here is the part most people never consider. You did not start with a blank slate. The birds in your yard already had a template from the people who lived there before you, a baseline expectation of how humans in that particular house behave. If the previous owners were calm and consistent feeders, you inherited a yard full of birds with a relatively low threat threshold. Birds already habituated to human presence, already comfortable with the proximity of the house. If the previous owners were loud, unpredictable, or simply never engaged with the yard at all, you inherited a different situation entirely. You walked into a rating system that had been running for years before you arrived. And now the last part, the part that is hardest to sit with. What happens to everything they know about you after you leave? At some point, you will leave that house. Everyone does. You will pack the boxes, load the truck, take one last look at the yard, and drive away. The feeder will come down. The water bath will be put in storage or left behind. The routines you have built, the morning trips to fill the seed, the quiet evenings on the porch, all of it will stop. And the birds will notice. Research on bird responses to habitat change shows that birds are acutely sensitive to disruptions in established patterns. A feeder that disappears overnight, a yard that suddenly goes quiet, a human routine that simply stops. The birds do not understand moving in the way we do. They do not know about leases or jobs in other cities or family circumstances that require relocation. What they know is that something reliable became unreliable. Something safe became uncertain. And the crow on the power line will watch the new people arrive, the same way it watched you arrive, the same way it watched everyone before you. It will begin a new file. It will run the same evaluation, predictable or unpredictable, calm or erratic, a source of safety or a source of threat. But here is what stays. The file on you does not close when you leave. In crow communities with overlapping territories, information about specific humans persists in the social network long after those humans have gone. A face associated with consistent safety, a face associated with consistent threat. Both remain in circulation. Both continue to shape how that community responds to similar faces, similar behaviors, similar patterns. You will leave your yard, but something of you will stay in it. In the memory of every crow that watched you, in the behavioral templates of every bird that learned your routine, in the files of a community that has been running longer than your neighborhood has existed and will keep running long after the next family moves in. Before you moved in, someone was already watching your house. They watched the family before you leave. They watched the house sit empty. They watched you arrive with your boxes and your furniture and your routines that meant nothing to them yet. And then slowly, visit by visit, morning by morning, they built a picture of you. Not a judgment, not a story, a file. Precise, detailed, continuously updated. The birds outside your window right now know things about your daily life that most of your neighbors do not. They have been paying attention in ways that most humans never do, with a consistency and a patience that outlasts careers and relationships and the particular chapter of life that brought you to that house. You moved into their territory. You built routines inside a system that was already running. And when you leave, that system will keep running, with or without you. The only question worth asking now is what kind of file you have been building since the day you arrived, because it is already in there, and it is not going anywhere. Tell me in the comments, how long have you lived in your current home, and have you ever noticed a bird that seemed to already know the yard when you arrived? A crow on the same power line, a cardinal at a feeder spot before you put one there. I want to hear about it. I read every single one. Subscribe if you have not already. I will see you in the next one.